Okay, hi, I think that's it. I think everyone should be able to see now. Welcome everybody, welcome to the BenQ webinar on visualizing data. My name is Adam Softley. I am from the design agency S&R. We work within data visualization, work with infographics, editorial design, brand. So this is one of my favorite subjects, if you like. So I'm going to just talk to you a bit. It's kind of top line about what is data visualization and how to use it. So just to kind of give you a bit of an idea about what we do as an agency here, I'm just going to show you some work. Now, unfortunately, our website is currently in development, so it's not up and running at the moment. But I'm just going to flick over to our Behance page that we have, because this will just kind of give you a bit of an idea about the type of projects that we work on. So you can see it's just from these thumbnails, it's not just data viz that we work on. There's lots of editorial projects as well, but what we find is these go sort of hand in hand. Editorial and data visualization go hand in hand. So there's lots of projects you'll see like that. Now there's also ones like, if I go into here, for example, as this is a BenQ webinar, I thought I would just get this up, and there's things like even product reviews. So this is a product review we've done for their 32-inch screen that we use here, the PD3200U, which is a fantastic 4K monitor. So you can sort of see anything from editorial design through to these types of infographics, which is not even sort of data as such, it's more of a sort of a story here. So there's projects like that. If I go back a bit, lots of illustration we do as well. And these are the sort of things we'll be talking about today, sort of, you know, how we come to choosing these sort of data sets, so similar like these projects here, and how to use it. So if I just go back to the presentation as well. So what we will be running through today is what is data visualization. So we will look at what are the differences between data visualization and infographics. We will be looking at why we should use them as well, why they're such a powerful form of communication. We'll also look at some misleading visualizations as well, also how to represent your data, the types of charts that there are, and we'll look at a few of those, and the pros and cons with those, and when to use and when not to use, and then best practices as well. So if I'll go through now. So data visualization and infographics is data visualized in a way where you can clearly see stories and trends. And really what it is, it doesn't have to necessarily have data points. So if I show something like you see here, there's actually no data points, but what you can see is that there's this clear trend, and as you go to sort of from the second half to the, you know, to the last quarter, you've got this big spike. So even without actually any data, it gives you an idea of what's happening, and this is why this is so powerful. Also, there's things that we understand. So, you know, the up arrow, the down arrow, there's the color that's being used as well. So it is so visual, you don't have to read anything. So this is why this is so powerful. It's also a global visual language, and what I mean by that is people understand bar charts and pie charts, and you know, they understand different sizes, different volumes of things, and how to read it. So this is something which, you know, is this global language that anyone can clearly see. And it's great, and in the world we live in now, with everything being so fast, with everyone sort of swiping on their iPads and any you know, news stories or whatever it is, it's great having these visual cues such as data visualizations or infographics. Now I've put this in here. This is a resource which the FT have, and I'd take down this this URL because it is a really good source. So ft.com/vocabulary. Now this here it gives you a bit of an idea of, depending on the type of data you've got or what you want it to do, it gives you an idea of what options you have with regards to charts. Now it's not something that I'm going to go into, and we will be looking at a few of these, but there's quite a lot there. But this is, I thought I'd put this in because it's a really good resource. So you know, if you're looking at correlation between things or ranking or you know, parts to whole, then you can use this and it will give you the options that you want. So that's ft.com/vocabulary. So a really good resource, free resource from the FT. So the questions often asked are, isn't using just standard charts quite limiting with your creative options? Now, one thing, years ago when I first got into data visualization, it was because I was looking at these beautiful visualizations. They were great. They were a piece of art. And then the sort of closer I got to them, when I was looking at them, I realized, you know, sometimes these things can take, you know, 5-10 minutes to look at and to read. And I think if there's a poster or something, that's fantastic. But, you know, the world that I live in and work in with, sort of, you know, with brand and marketing and just everything so fast, then we need something that people do understand. So it comes back to that global language again. So I think what I'd like to get across here is, you know, pie charts, bar charts, line graphs, all of these, they are great and they're great to use. And I don't think it does limit your creative options. It's about how you use them. So just to give you some examples, this is a piece that we did, and this is just a simple bar chart that you see here. And obviously it's integrated with an illustration and around the editorial, but you see as it goes up. So it is just a bar chart, that's all it is, but it's just been used in a slightly different way. Again, looking at these here, now this left and right, they're exactly the same data sets, and again, it's just a bar chart. So what you have here, it's on the left, it's just broken up in a different way and sort of with these semicircles, and then on the right hand side, you've got it in sort of this 360-degree circular chart. But it's just showing you can get creative with it. It's not limiting. So I think you choose what charts you're going to use. You're going to choose a chart that people understand, and then it's up to the creative really to really, you know, get it visualized in a way that's engaging. There's also simple ways like this where you can see, you know, here on the left hand side with the coins showing the money, or the battery showing energy here, or even thumbs up and thumbs down, or people. So there's lots of fun ways that you can do it. Similar here, pie charts within the watches. So yeah, so get creative with it, but you know, it's about using that format of charts that people really do already understand. And again, just another example here, even just with a map as well. So what are the difference between data visualizations and infographics? Now, I think that lots of people have different answers to this really. The way we look at it here is data visualization is it's a single data set. So it's something like, for example, like here again, we've got a single data set on the left hand side. It's not an infographic, it's integrated again with some editorial, but it is just one single data set. Whereas if we're talking infographics, then I would say that's lots of single data sets that kind of make a story. So again, just to give you some examples, again, this is a data visualization because it's one data set, but it's done in an engaging way. Whereas something like these two dashboards here, you'll see they are single data visualizations, but they're put together to make a story or a summary. So these are what we would call infographics. So that's the difference between the two really, is one is the single data set, and an infographic is where you have those data sets together to create the story. And again, here's another example of, you know, the editorial with an infographic as well, and those different data sets. Now this one here, again, this is more of what I would call an infographic, but there's not actually any data that you see here. So just to scroll down a bit, but what we've done here, we've pulled out a bit of the, what's within the text, but this is an illustration to accompany it. So it's still an information graphic. It's still showing a visual representation of what the copy is. So again, anyone that's looking at this quite quickly can look at it and get an idea of what the copy is without actually having to read it. So why do we use infographics? What are they for? So we use them to communicate complex stories and to share knowledge. We use them to locate and visualize problems and help find solutions, to comprehend complex information visually, making it intelligible, quickly and effective to understand, and to identify relationships and patterns quickly, and to represent statistical data in a visual form, and also to pinpoint emerging trends as well. So now this has been around for years, even from go back as far as cave paintings really. But I've just put a few examples here just so you can see sort of the early days. And although this one on the left is a little bit gross with the urine wheel, it actually is a great visualization on how it was used to diagnose disease based on the color of this wheel. Same in sort of 1640 with this chart, which was used by sailors to navigate across the seas and to locate harbors. And then you've got William Playfair here with these bars and pie charts. Now, William Playfair was actually said to be the inventor of the bar chart and the pie chart. So this is some that is done here in the 17th century. And then you've got this one here on the left, which actually showed the cholera outbreaks in London. And what John Snow did here in 1854 is basically just created a bar chart in the areas of where these outbreaks were, so you could see where it was all happening. And then on the right hand side here, this is quite a famous one, the Nightingale chart by Florence Nightingale, that shows how many people had died in the army in the East. So these visualizations, although it's kind of at the moment we're sort of, there's data visualization and infographics all around us. They have been around a long time, and it's there's such a great way of communicating complex stories. So why is it so powerful? So there's two answers to this really. The first would be because we understand them cognitively and emotionally. Now, cognitively, graphics speed up and increase our level of communication. They also increase comprehension and recollection, and also retention as well. We remember a lot more as well with graphics. Graphical clues also help us decode text and attract attention to information. And they also direct the reader's attention, increasing the likelihood that they will remember. And now emotionally as well, pictures affect our emotions and our attitudes. So again, it's great to have graphics there where you can tap into that. And graphics also engage our imagination and heighten our creative thinking by stimulating areas of the brain, which in turn lead to a more profound and accurate understanding of the presented material. So that leads me into sort of the second part of this, where we remember graphics because they are processed in our long-term memory. Now there's this quote that Dr. Lionel Burmark said, which I really like, which is, unless words, concepts, ideas are hooked onto an image, they'll go in one ear, sail through the brain and go out the other ear. Words are processed by our short-term memory, where we can only retain about 7 bits of information. Images, on the other hand, go directly into our long-term memory, where they are remembered. So, that's a great quote that shows, graphics are the ones that you remember as opposed to words. Now, just to support that statement, what we've done here, if I give you a text description of something, so for example, a curved line with every point equal distance from a center. Now, remembering, that paragraph of text is not going to be as easy or simple as the graphic description, which is obviously just a circle. Or again, if it was a polygon with 4 edges, all of equal adjoining angles, in that text description, the graphic description, a square, so you can connect with it a lot easier. So also, just some facts here. Just visual content is 40 times more likely to be shared on social media networks. Now, everything these days is really visual, and everyone's going to it from from video to these quick infographics, and text is becoming less and less now in the world we live in. Also, content with visuals gets 94% more views than text alone as well, so they are great to use. So there's also the side of using data where at times people have used it for misleading information as well. So just to give you an example, now I'm not saying this was necessarily on purpose. This can be a genuine mistake, and mistakes do happen. But you do see at times things like we've got the exit polls here from 2017, where if you can have a look at this data, we've got 314 at the top here, dropping down to 266. Then we're not dropping that far to get right the way down to 34. And then 14 again is a small drop, with 22, which should be up here, kind of all the way down here. So for someone who wasn't really reading the numbers, and going back to what I was saying at the beginning of this presentation, where you understand it without actually having to read the numbers, this can be very misleading. So this one, for example, should have in fact looked more like this here on the left. So very different. There's also you've got to let the data sort of speak for itself. There, it's nice to get really creative, as we saw earlier with some of the data, but also we've got to understand that that it does tell those right stories. So, for example, here having this 3-dimensional bar chart that you've got here, there's questions around, where is 0 point? Where does it start? Is it, is it on the same plane, or is it on different? So, for example, if I pull up a bar chart with the same data, which is just flat on, you can see these numbers are they're very close. So looking on the left-hand side, it's very hard to determine what's bigger or smaller. So just when you're looking at your data and thinking about ways creatively, if it is important for you to see clear differences, such as, which often you do when you're using something like a bar chart, just think about the best ways that you'll visualize that, because if it's going to be something like we have here on the left, it may not get the point across that you're after. So again, something like we have here, 3-dimensional, A and B are quite similar in size, so it's difficult at first glance to really see what's the biggest and the smallest. So looking at how it is front on the flat view, then it would look something like that, and you can clearly say A is bigger than B. So how to represent your data. So now, if there's anything anyone can take away from this webinar today, this would be the one thing that I would say to really pay attention to, and this is adding context. Now, with our clients, so many times we get data sets, and clients are so close to their data, they talk about big numbers or small numbers, and it means everything to them, but actually to their audience, without any context, they don't really know what the full story is. So to give you an example of that, if we say, for example, in 2008, Goldman Sachs had a total net revenue of 22.2 million, which, I mean, to me, $22.2 million sounds like a huge amount of money. So if we just visualize that, there we go. So that's great. So, without knowing anything, I'll go, okay, $22.2 million, that's a big number. Now, it's not until we add context we really see the bigger picture. So if we add the previous year, they were at 45.9 million. So it isn't until you add that context that that big picture becomes clear. And obviously you can do that with more and more data sets. So as I said, if there's anything, when looking at your data, really think about the context around it as well. It's not just about displaying the numbers of today, it's of yesterday or even projections as well. It's also about finding the right story within your data. Now, there's no real rules about how to read data, and sometimes you can just keep going and find lots of different stories. But it's to try and really just pull out as much as you can, really, to give a true to give a sort of a truth to the data that's there. So to give you an example, if we say we've got two people here, we've got Alex and Rachel, and we talk about the biscuits that Alex and Rachel has eaten. So Alex has eaten 2 biscuits and Rachel has eaten 6 biscuits. So if we visualize that, we can see Rachel has eaten 3 times more biscuits than Alex. So that's kind of one data set, if you like. And there's a truth in that, because that's exactly what has happened. That's how many biscuits they've eaten. But it's when we dig a bit deeper into the story to try and add, it's not really context, but it's just to try and add another layer to it. So if we say, for example, well, Alex and Rachel, they both weigh the same. So they're both at 65 kilograms, for example. And Alex has eaten 2 biscuits, as we know. Rachel has eaten 6, but Alex has actually run 1 mile, let's say, that week. But Rachel has run 10 miles that week. So if we look at biscuits per mile, Alex has actually had 2, whereas Rachel has 0.66. So again, if you look at the bottom here, before where Rachel was much bigger, now Alex is much bigger. So it's not until you really dig deeper and understand the story to get the best out of the data and the story that you're trying to tell. So defining your audience as well. This is very important as well. It's knowing, it's the positioning of your infographic. So I'm going to give an example here of something we did a while ago, which was an infographic for a client, which was about compound interest. Now, the brief for this was it had to be on brand, which is fine. They wanted it to not take too long to read, and more importantly, had to be shareable as well. And the audience was between 25 and 40 years old. Now, when we saw this content, it's like, okay, now to make compound interest exciting, for it to become a shareable bit of content, is quite difficult. So this was kind of the content that was given, which is fine. So as you go through, it talks about what compound interest is, and there's a nice chart that shows how it sort of stacks up over time. It compares it to simple interest that you see sort of down the bottom here. As you scroll down, they then wanted this equation in there, which is probably not the most engaging thing for a lot of people to have in there. And sort of it goes down, but there's nothing there that's really pulling their audience in or defining their audience. So we kind of had to think about it and thought, well, how are we going to sort of turn this on its head? If this is to be a shareable content, how are we going to reach that audience of 25 to 40-year-olds? So what we did is we created this new headline: how compound interest can help you afford a mortgage, a sports car, or save for a pension. So straight away, by putting these 3 items, a house up there for 25,000, a sports car for 45,000, and 200,000 for the pension, it gives you something that people can instantly relate to. So again, as you go through, there's not much here that's different. You've still got the showing how compound interest works. As you scroll down, what we did then is we just did this line graph, and on that line graph we plotted how long it would take for you to save with compound interest and with simple interest and with no interest. for these three things. So you can see, you've got a mortgage here quite low with compound interest, whereas with no interest at all, it's years and years later. So this is just something that's really quick and visual, and instantly you're connecting with your audience. And then again, as you go down, it's just quite simple. It just keeps talking about these three things, so it's not overcomplicating the story. So connecting with your audience, if you can really think about ways you're going to do that, it's going to really help your infographic or your visualization. So organizing your data. So there's a way that you can organize your data known as latch. So Richard Solwarman, who's a graphic designer, an architect, and the founder of TED, came up with this latch, this way to organize information. So he was saying that you do it by location, by alphabet, by time, by category, or by hierarchy. So if we sort of drill down into each of them, so if we start with location, and then we use these buildings here as an example. So the way that we can categorize these buildings is by location. So we can literally say where, and you can see here how it's plotted on where they are in the world, and also we've got it pulled out here as well. So location is a great way of categorizing things. There, you could also, moving on, you could categorize them alphabetically. So here, again, you can see that we've done it starting with the Burj Khalifa going down to the Shard in London. You can see that it's going through the alphabet and categorizing it in that way. And what's nice about if we did it that way, at times it can give you nice random spikes with your data. It's not in this order of high to low, but actually there is it does make sense. There's still logic there for why it's that way. It's not just random. There's time as well, so great for things like timelines. So you can see here the different dates in which the buildings were completed. And then you've got category as well. So for here, we would just go tool, super tool, or mega tool. So you can categorize the buildings as well. And there's lots of different ways that you can categorize things here. This is what we've used, these three things, this tool, super tool, and mega tool. And then going into the final one is hierarchy as well. So here we're just looking at the tallest to the shortest. So the way you categorize these is, it just depends on what the story is that you want to show, really. But it just goes to show, there is many different ways in which you can display your data. So types of charts. Now, what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go through the types of charts that we often use, and I'll go through sort of the pros and the cons of why to use those charts as well. So starting with your regular bar chart, the trusty bar chart. So pros for bar chart is they are easy to understand, and it's clear to see trends as well. So even if you see here, you've got these numbers are very similar, but you can actually see, the orange one here is taller, or the blue one here is taller. So it's great to see these clear trends between them. And the comparison between numbers is also really easy with bar charts. Cons, they're not the most visually engaging. As I said earlier, you do have to get a bit creative with them if you want them to look, really exciting. And then also they're not as clear as line charts to use when comparing multiple data sets. So to use these, I would use them if you want to show a clear trend or accuracy in your data. And also I'd use them if you're creating an infographic which has lots of different types of data sets, then it's great to put a bar chart in there. And the great thing is you can stretch them, you can have them tall, or you can have them wide, or as we've seen before, you can have them as fans or circular. So there's quite a lot you can do with them. And then when not to use, maybe if you wanted a visually cutting edge infographic, just don't use too many of them. You know, just mix it up a bit with other types of charts if you can. So next we're looking at the fan chart here. So these are, the pros are, they're visually quite striking. They produce nice geometric shapes for engaging layouts, and these are easier to compare bars than radial bar charts. The cons on this are the outer wedges here are actually, although they're similar in size, because they're on the outer, they seem much bigger than the smaller ones, and it does take time to interpret these as well. So I would use these if you need more visual impact than a bar chart, for example, and also use if you want to ranking in order of size. And I wouldn't use them if this is something where you just need a quick interpretation of the numbers. So maybe not best for that. So moving on to the radial bar charts. So here, these are quite visually striking again, and these are great for engaging page layouts as well, and especially if you're working within editorial, you can move these around and you can have them as different shapes, and you can work the editorial around them quite nicely. So it works well for that. They are quite hard to interpret as well, and it's hard to compare the bars accurately, especially due to the distortions as they sort of curve around. So again, you've got this, the numbers here. In fact, you've got 2.6 here on the inner circle and 2.2 on the outer circle, although this looks bigger. So if interpreting the data accurately is important, then this is not the one to use. So I would use it, I mean, I think I've just said this, but if visual impact is important, then more important than comparing the data, then use it, and also use it for ranking in size and order, and don't use it if clear comparison between numbers is needed. So pie charts. So these are great and effective at showing a proportion or percentage of a whole amount. Visually, they can be quite attractive, and they are very easy to understand as well. It is difficult to see trends if you have, you know, pie charts next to each other. If you've got multiple ones, then it's hard to compare the data that way. It's just easier to compare the data from sort of a pie chart and all the data within that as a whole. And another con to pie charts is you can't really display negatives with this, so minuses. So when to use when you're talking about a whole, when you're talking about 100%, and use them if you're looking for something that will quickly engage people as well. Like I said, really easy to read. Try not to use if you want to compare lots of segments as well. So if you've got lots of data points within a pie chart, it might be difficult to read those subtle differences. So the Sankey diagram. So these are used to effectively show flows and trends, and they really reflect the big picture of what's going on as well. And now these can be really visually striking, but they also can be quite difficult to read sometimes if you're not sure what you're looking at. So, and especially if there's lots of data points within that as well, they can be quite overwhelming when you see lots of, you know, lots going on, and they're quite hard to read. So I would use to show transfers, flows and connections between different groups. But if a quick understanding of your data is really needed, maybe that's not the one, because they do take time sometimes to work out. But again, it depends on, you know, how many data points you've got within your data set. You know, really can be quite attractive, these ones, and look really engaging on a page. So then we come to bubbles and shapes and pictograms and icons. So these are something that can be really engaging as well. Shapes can reflect the subject matter quite easily. So for example, you've got, you know, the people that we see here, showing the different groups of people. So, you know, icons are a great way of showing things, and if you can make the sizes relevant as well, then that's fantastic. and it's good, and it allows for flexible and dynamic layouts as well. The cons to this is that they are not as precise as, you know, bar charts, for example. So I would use, if you're looking for something that's visually quite impactful, but not for if you want to make really precise comparisons. And then we have tree maps as well. So tree maps are great for a flexible design. You can squash them and you can pull them about, and they generally, no matter where you pull them, they'll stay in prose, so everything is still relative to each other. So that can be great for designers if you're working to complex layouts. They are a pleasant way of presenting values, and you can fit a lot of data within tree maps, but obviously it depends on what the size of your page is, or your web page, or whatever you might be using it for. They can be hard to label. If you've got lots of small numbers, they can get quite difficult. And if you do label them and you've got lots of small numbers, they can look quite unpleasant as well. Then you've got a circular packing tree map on the right, which is also great if you wanted to display different ways to show groups as well. So that's a nice way of doing it, using that. Okay, then now we've got area graphs as well. So area graphs are great. They show quantity over time, and they reveal trends, and these are great for looking at trends over time. They're more striking than a line graph as well, which is just sort of a single line. These are sort of filled in with that, as you can see, like the orange showing the full area. They are hard if you've got multiple data on top of each other. It is hard to show these multiple data sets, and as you can see here, sort of it's going up and down, but it's hard, you kind of get lost. So again, also if you wanted to use something, and this is sort of on the fly with people to understand this quite quickly, maybe not the best way. Maybe you should go more to a line graph. So when to use to show precise quantities over time, to show trends in relation to another variable. When not to use is when comparing multiple data sets that overlap. Now, similar to what we've just looked at, but these are stacked area graphs. So these are great for showing several quantities over time. Visually striking, and they visually striking compared to line graphs, again, because they're sort of filled in rather than just these light lines. Now, the negatives on this is, although the overall trend is clear, it is hard to see each data set and what the numbers are with that because of how they're stacked. So they can be hard to read sometimes as well. So these are ones that we would use if the overall trend is important, but the inner layers that you see are less important, and also use if you wanted something where you could have a lot of color on the page as well. I wouldn't use if quantities need to be comparable, so I would use a line graph instead. And here it is, the line graph. So as we've said, the pros that make it more effective for comparing several trends over time, as you see here at the bottom. But just because they are generally these light lines, they're not going to be as visually engaging and striking as you would with other charts such as the area graph. So when to use it would be if we were to compare several trends in the most accurate format, and often you get this in formal and academic work as well, because it's just clear and easy to see. When not to use is if we are looking for something that's really impactful, and if that's more important than comparing, then we wouldn't use it for that. Now we've got the scatter graph here. So scatter graphs are great to show the relationship between two variables, and you can also include the line of best to show quick trends. The cons is it's hard sometimes to understand and to understand the correlation between the X and Y coordinates. So we would use that if we were looking for an effective way to show the correlation between two variables. If there's no clear trend, unlike we've got here, we can see we're talking about gross national product and life expectancy, and you can see sort of as the gross national product goes up, life expectancy goes up, and there's a clear trend. If there's not a clear trend within your data, probably not best to use. And then we've got the bubble plot, so very similar to what we just saw, but this is then adding another variable on there. So in this we're talking about population, so same sort of data sets but adding population on. So this again, it's, you know, the cons on here is it is quite hard to understand and to see the correlation. And if here, as you see, we use this sort of this transparency, if we didn't do that, it would have been hard to see what those numbers are behind. So when to use is to use if you're looking for a very effective way to show a relationship between three variables. If interactive users can roll over these numbers on things like interactive infographics where the numbers sort of pop up, then these can be great for that. So something like these complex, then that's the time to use them. When not to use them is when informal infographics or data is to be read really quickly. So so that's kind of with the charts. Now also at times we have to visualize data which is not quantitative. So when we do that, if we did look at a quantitative data, so for example here we have Tom is 10% taller than Harry, and we can clearly see that Tom is a bit taller with these two bars. If it was qualitative data, we don't have that 10%, and we say something like, you know, Tom dresses more casually than Harry. This is when you can do it with illustration or iconography or pictograms. So that's a good way of doing it. So don't always think that, you know, that it always has to be hard data that you have. You can, with numbers, you can have qualitative data as well. So then just looking at best practices as well. So color theory, it's, you know, obviously it's great to have color, and we're often limited by brand guidelines, but try and keep things as simple as possible. You know, to use tints with your color, and also remember that color is a form of communication too. So you've got here with your, you know, the ticks and your crosses, if you're green and you're red. If you are using color, try to use complementary color as well, so it doesn't distract anything. So here you can see the tints which work nicely, or you've got colors which complement each other. So just try and keep it quite simple and not too many. If you have got large data sets and you need lots of, you know, to display it with, either you haven't got enough, you can't use enough tints, or there's not enough colors, then you can use patterns as well, and that's another great way of showing the difference between it. So I think, you know, colors that go really well, not too many. As a rule, we tend to use no more than 3. Use your tints. When you're using tints, don't go from 100% to 95% to 90%. Give them some slight differences, you know, so from 100% to 75% tint to 50%. And then for anything else, then you've got your patterns as well. So and patterns can be obviously anything you like. So just some examples here to use is the hash lines, the waves, or the dots. Avoid using colors which clash. So I've just put some up here which if you're colorblind, this would make it quite difficult to see. So just to be aware of that as well. And again, you know, depending on brand guidelines, it's not always easy. But just try and keep your colors away from sort of these groups that you see in front of you. Hierarchy as well. Looking at hierarchy, use natural increments like, you know, 5s and 10s and 15s rather than 3s, 9s. You know, so it makes it really easy. And also with like charts, try and start at 0 as well. It's not always going to be possible with things, but try and start your charts at 0 as well, or it does distort the data. Keys and legends, if you've got a large data set or there's lots of labelings such as you see here, then use keys on there, you know, so then, and again, use color to pull it out and do it that way rather than having it all labeled. Otherwise it would just get messy and you won't understand it. When looking at ranking, this really, I guess with anything, it's sort of logic going from small to big, or this here going from, you know, clockwise as well. So start a pie chart at your 0 here at your 12 o'clock and go clockwise round. And then fonts as well. Pull out your information that you want people to see with your font. So if the numbers are what is important, then use, but embolden them or make them a different color, or something there that just makes them a bit different so you can see the difference. So in conclusion to all of that, firstly, get credible data set. Make sure that you're true to the data as well. Find the story within your data. Look for those interesting facts. Look for the context around it, and once you've got that, you can build upon that. Define your audience and know who you're talking to. Position that infographic or that data set towards them and what they would like to see, and that connect with them. And then organize your data as well. Make sure that it sits right on the page. There should be a hierarchy of almost like a pyramid tailing down, where you've got your hero information at the top and then the less important as you go down. And then choose the right charts or icons or even illustrations as well to visualize your data. And then finally, get creative, have fun with it. So once you sort of got all of that, then as you saw at the beginning, then yeah, just really go to town on it. But just remember, this is a language where you want people to see clear differences. You want it where people can understand this quickly, and you really want to get your message across to them. This is a communication tool. So that's it. That's the end of my presentation. So thank you very much. I hope that was helpful to you. I'm just going to have a look now. I don't know if there's any questions. I'm just going to have a quick look to see if there's anyone there has got any questions, or if you have, please send them across. Let me have a look. Okay, so let me have a quick look here. Okay, so I have this one here from Martin. It says, "Dear Adam, thank you for your presentation. Is there a specific software you would recommend to manipulate data with accuracy while maximizing creative freedom?" Personally, I mean, because of my editorial background, and I use InDesign a lot, so I will start with Illustrator and I will put my data sets in there, whether that's from, it usually starts with Excel or some sort of PDF or something, but I'll put my data into Illustrator, but then I will take it out of Illustrator and I'll put it into InDesign. Now I think once you put it into InDesign, it allows you a lot more flexibility to move it around and to change it. So there's sort of lots of tips and tricks, and maybe, I'll do something another day that sort of shows how you build infographics within, from Illustrator to InDesign. And the reason I use InDesign is because of that flexibility, where I can just sort of stretch things and all the labeling stays together, and I can move it around, and I could, change the page, and, just even with style sheets, you can do quite a lot as well. So personally, I use InDesign for it, but it always starts in Illustrator. What else do we have here? Excuse me. I've got here from Ashley Davey. So any more examples from presenting qualitative data? I don't have anything else in here, but again, if you have a look at our Behance page, which I showed up the front, and again, we can share that address after this webinar. There are examples there, so you can have a look on how we usually deal with that. And then, is this document available for download? There are many helpful notes that are hard to write down. I will share a version of this afterwards as well. So I believe after this, there's going to be an email that will come around to you guys, and I think it will be in there. So yeah, or it will come through a little bit later, but there'll be a version of it. Yeah. Okay, this one is from Mattis. Hi, Mattis. It says, Adam, in your opinion, how would you take on an infographic for big data? Oh God, that's a good question. Now, we've done lots of guidelines for big sort of corporate companies, and one thing, you know, when doing guidelines is it's hard to define, you know, how big a data set is going to be. So, you know, where do you stop? And it can just keep going and keep going. I think with, you know, what we're looking at here with infographics and data visualization, we're not actually looking at big data, we're looking at small data. We're looking at big data is kind of funneled through and filtered, and what we should be looking at is that filtered data, which I call, you know, small data, and it can still be a fairly big data set, but not huge. If it was a huge data set, then I mean, there's lots of different ways of doing it. It just depends. I mean, interactive is generally how I would go. If there's a huge data set and you want people to move around it, then what I would do is, yeah, I'd have something that's online that you can sort of manipulate and take your own journey yourself. Okay, I hope that answered your question, Matas. Now, is there any book you would suggest to learn more about infographics and data visualization? Cool, that's a good question as well. There's loads. I think just have a look what's out there. I mean, we've got lots of books on our shelves here. I think one thing to bear in mind as well is, you know, is graphic design, the rules around graphic design apply to data visualization. All we're doing is problem solving here. So, you know, it's about, you know, you've got a message that you need to get across, and that comes, you know, you want to use fonts which are clear, you want to use colors which are clear, you want to use grid systems, you don't want things to be too long. So it really, you treat it the same as you would any design project, really. So don't just look at the books on data visualization, look at books on, you know, graphic design in general, because that will help. What other questions do we have? So how much testing do you do with the effectiveness of your visualizations? Is feedback given from external sources as well? Yes and no. Again, it depends on the projects. Sometimes when we've done visualizations, it depends on the audience as well. So if it's more B2C, we've done stuff which has to go into heavy testing. So we'll have a brief, we'll come back with, okay, these are the different ways in which you can visualize your data. Then that will go into workshops, and it's, you know, it's been workshops, whether it's in the UK or if it's globally, or it goes up and down the country, and they have these different groups in. I think I've probably been in the game a long time. I often know what the results are going to be, because it's quite obvious once you sort of see it, but we do test it at times, yeah, but also within the studio here as well. I mean, it's, you know, we've got a studio here of about 12 people, and it goes through most people to see if it all makes sense. Brilliant, and I think that's the end of the questions, and we are getting close to 7 o'clock now. So I would like to thank BenQ for inviting me to this. I'd like to thank everybody else as well for watching. I hope it was of interest. Yeah, and yeah, good. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.